Today, Terry Byrne, our volunteer historian, is taking us on a tour of the church tunnels, another part of St. Joseph's that few parishioners have ever seen. Terry, why are they referred to as the tunnels?
Well, actually, Chris, you may recall back in an earlier video that this third church at St. Joseph's was built on the foundations of the second church. It saved the church about $40,000 when they were building this third version of the church. Between the outer walls of the church and the inner wall of the church, there is a cavity in which we put our ventilation ducts. But that cavity is quite large, and in some areas you can walk right through it, and we can store stuff in there. So it looks like a tunnel, and that's why I got the nickname the tunnels.
So Terry, do you think we can go and take a look?
Certainly. Follow me.
So we've made the short climb into the tunnels with Terry. Terry, one thing I noticed is that we use the word plural. We use tunnels. Why would that be?
Well, on each side of the hall, there are ventilation shafts. And they go from one end of the hall to the other end. And some areas of the tunnels are quite large, and other areas are quite small. But come ahead through and you'll get to see various things that are stored in the tunnel.
So one of the things that we could imagine at these tunnels is that would have been soot, I imagine, at some point on the walls, and that would have been probably fairly significant. Do you know if the tunnels have ever been cleaned?
Yes, actually they are quite spotless in comparison to how I found them back in 2007. You may recall that I took plaques out of here, and each plaque was covered with soot. And when I took a plaque out, my hands were black from the soot. Gary in 2007 thought this was a great time to clean up the tunnels, so he got some street people in, gave them masks, and they helped clean out the tunnels.
Now, what would you normally store in the tunnels?
Well, in this side of the tunnels it's been designated for the Women's Center, and they can store their supplies in here. But we also have supplies from other outside organizations and other groups that may use our hall, like planting seeds.
In your book, you mentioned that the current church was built on the foundations of the second church. Are there any visible areas of the old foundations in this tunnel?
Yes, come ahead this way and I'll show you. You just have to bend your head under the ventilation shaft here. And then, if you look to the left here, you can see the greenish bricks that have been painted. If you take a look, all this wall here is from the foundations of the second church. Now if you scan to the left over here, you'll find the additions to the first that were made on that wall to the third church. So this is all new part of the foundation for the third part of the church.
So we still have visible areas of the former church here in that case.
Most definitely. If you come along this way, Chris, I'll stay in the light because we don't have a lot of light down here. But if you look over here, Chris, you see that the shaft there and the motor?
Absolutely.
Well, Father Jim was telling me the story about what happened back in the 70s, 80s. And the church used to bring in big chunks of ice and put them on the floor beside the ventilation fan there, reverse the fans, and it would blow cold air into the church. That was their idea of air conditioning.
So that is probably a very effective technology in the day, and I'm sure some of us who have lived through summers at St. Joe's will know that it can get hot in the church. Now, we spoke a little bit about the fact that there is another tunnel, and the question for me would be, is that tunnel similar to this one?
Yes, it is almost exactly the same. It was used primarily by the supper table, but they didn't really have a need for it, so our Friday night dance swing group stores some of their stuff in there.
Now, to end this session, do you have another anecdote that you might share with us?
Well, before we leave, if I may, I want to show them the other part of the tunnel. I'm not going to bring you all the way down there, Chris, but if you take a shot through here.
So Terry, I've managed to climb my way into this section of the tunnel. You're on the other side of the wall, but can you just say a few words about what I'm seeing here?
Yes. Down there you're looking at the ventilation shaft that goes along the length of the hall. At the very end of that ventilation shaft, there's another room like this one, and there's a door that goes out it goes out into the hallway right beside the women's bathroom.
So a moment ago, Terry, I sort of gave a bit of a teaser about another anecdote. So do you want to share that one now?
Certainly. When I was first looking in the tunnels, I used to always say to people, when I went down there and looked in the tunnels through all the stuff we had, I didn't find any dead oblates. And people sort of chuckled. But there's a rationale behind that comment. And that is that in the first church, down in the basement of the first church was a crypt. And in that crypt, they had all of the deceased members of the Oblate Orders who worked out of St. Joe's. And they were subsequently moved to the cemetery for the Scholastic, St. Joseph's Scholastic, when the second church was being built. So to date, no dead oblates in the basement of the church.
Well, that's reassuring to know. Thanks, Terry, for taking us to a part of the church again that few have actually visited.